God makes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Too much rain, way too much rain. I think we're all still in a bit of a state of shock after the floods at the end of January and now the devastation of Cyclone Gabrielle. Those photos and stories coming out of the Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti and north and around Auckland, they defy belief, really. It's like we're watching a movie or something. But we mourn those who have died, and we mourn with those who have lost everything. In Hawke's Bay, one of the great symbols of survival and rebirth after the 1931 earthquake was the Navy ship Veronica, which was anchored offshore when the earthquake struck. On Friday, when HMNZS Te Mana arrived, and today, when the Canterbury arrives to help, I think it's going to feel really surreal for the people of Napier. History repeating itself after some generations marked by trauma from the 1931 earthquake, and now they find themselves again a place of devastation. One of the most heartbreaking images for me was to see Hokoriri School with mud and water up to the roofs in the Esk Valley. Hokoriri is an Anglican Māori girls' school, the sister school of the more famous Te Aoti School. Many of the girls who board there come from families with limited means, and to lose their whole school in an entirety, it's just so unjust. Luckily, due to the foresight of the staff, the girls were evacuated well ahead of time to St Joseph's Māori Girls' School, and many have since been flown home in tiny planes to Ruatoria and other places they come from. What will become of their school year, I wonder? We know already, I think, that these floods and disasters have affected poorer communities more in both Auckland and in the rural areas. In some ways, of course, we're all affected, but the consequences of the rain seems to be falling more on those poorer communities. Whenever disaster strikes like this, we ask why, don't we? Why God? Why now? Why here? We know in our heads that God is not a puppet master in the sky. We know God doesn't zap different parts of the world with disaster. And helpfully, in this gospel reading today, Jesus tells us that the rain falls equally on everyone. But I think in our hearts, we still question why those firefighters in Muruai, why the child who died in the Esk Valley, why Hokoriri? And we know in our heads the answer is nature's randomness, along with climate change. We know in Tairāwhiti it's about land use like forestry and inadequate infrastructure all over our cities. But in our hearts we still ask, why God, why? And I wish I had an answer, but of course I don't. Our only answer, I think, is what we have seen in the incredible heroism of the helicopter pilots plucking people off roofs, other people opening their homes to strangers, army and road workers and electricity workers toiling through the night. And as the needs become clearer, we are going to be able to support with our donations and with help. This morning we've given you a sheet that was just arrived on Friday from the Anglican Missions Board. Our national Anglican Church has set up an appeal, and a lot of that I'm sure will go to support the Diocese of Tairāwhiti and Waiapu. So we can offer those donations as well as our prayer. In his weekly video this week, Bishop Ross told a beautiful story about connection and help. On Tuesday, I think it was, the bishops were having their normal Tuesday morning Zoom meeting, and Bishop Andrew Hedge, the Bishop of Waiapu in Napier, is a paramedic. So he, of course, was doing paramedic duties, but he joined the Zoom on his phone from the ambulance station. And Archbishop Philip is in Ghana at the moment at an Anglican meeting, and he zoomed in, and with him was the Archbishop of Canterbury, who wanted to encourage the bishops because of the floods. And he ended up, the Archbishop of Canterbury, talking to the paramedics in Bishop Andrew's team in Napier and encouraging them. And I thought that was an amazing example of how, kind of through serendipity or God's blessing, we can connect and support each other. I'm sure that was a special moment for those paramedics. So there are going to be many ways that we can help. Now, this morning we had a reading from the book of Leviticus, and it's not often that we read Leviticus on a Sunday morning. In fact, I think one of the commentators said this is the only time in the 3-year reading cycle we hear from this book. And the piece we heard this morning is part of a long list of rules for living given to the Hebrew people. You shall not steal, you shall not defraud, you shall not slander. But in light of this week's events, 2 lines really caught my eye. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field. You shall not strip the vineyard bare. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. So when bringing in the harvest, the idea is that the farmer literally leaves a strip of whatever the crop is for those who are landless to harvest. And the same with the grapes. You don't take them all, but you leave some for your neighbour who may have none. So that the way you farm your land or run your business is not just about you, the owner, but it's about the whole community, making sure all are cared for. Pretty amazing rules from at least 1500 BC or earlier. And we've seen that same care these last weeks, everyone sharing resources and food, everyone helping each other out, following those commandments. But taking a wider view and stepping back a bit, some of the causes of these floods and some of the damage is because people have not taken care, because people have not thought of the bigger picture. The forestry companies in Tairāwhiti have not addressed the damage that slash the left behind branches and trees can do. Planners and developers and councils have not given enough care to our drains and then keeping them clear. And of course, every one of us has not done enough to cut our carbon emissions. So we've not obeyed the commandment, which is also in the Leviticus passage, to love our neighbours as ourselves. That commandment we often think is coming from Jesus, but it comes from this passage in Leviticus. Love your neighbour as yourself. And the writers of Leviticus and other parts of the Hebrew scripture would have had no hesitation in seeing our cyclone as the judgment of God. God acting in the world to change the course of events, to correct the ways of the people, or to send a message. Now today, we do not see God in that way. We do not see God as someone who acts and punishes in that way. But we can, I think, see the floods and the cyclones themselves as a kind of judgment, a message, a wake-up call, time to change, time to act. The rain falls on the just and the unjust, and the wake-up call is for everyone. So as we go forward, we'll hear more about those opportunities to help those who are in need of assistance and rebuilding in the short term. But in the longer term, we also need to think about those bigger issues and what we can do to be part of the process in our city council and in our government for planning, and what we can do to mitigate climate change. I spoke a couple of weeks ago about our compost bins, and some people have stepped up to volunteer. Thank you. There is room for more. Later on in the year, after we've had our confirmation service in April, there's going to be another opportunity, an opportunity for tree planting. There's a new initiative across the worldwide Anglican Communion called the Anglican Forest. And the idea is that when someone is baptised or confirmed, they plant a tree, just one tree. But multiply that by the numbers of Anglicans in our world, there's 85 million, and if just some of those people are getting baptised or confirmed on any one day, and if everyone plants a tree, then the idea is we have a worldwide forest. And so on the 30th of April, Bishop Ross will be here with us to confirm some of our young people, and during Lent I'll be talking to you more about that confirmation process and how we're going to support our candidates. And then we'll go on a tree planting day, and we will accompany our candidates to plant their trees, and we will be part of the Anglican Forest. So composting and planting trees, a couple of ways we can act. But knowing that we're doing those tiny things doesn't take away the shock and the grief of so many. We are standing with all those who are suffering as well. And we can ask together, why? And then we can pick up and move on and help each other to act justly in the way we live our lives, leaving some of the harvest so everyone can share it, loving our neighbour, and learning to build our cities better so that we can all enjoy a future together. Cities and towns and places where the rain will fall on the righteous and the unrighteous, but no one will drown.